The ink on the divorce decree was still wet when David asked me if I wanted to stop for coffee on the way home. We were standing on the concrete steps of the county courthouse. It was a Tuesday in late October, the kind of morning where the wind has just enough bite to remind you that winter is coming. I had a manila folder tucked under my arm. Inside it were 34 years of our lives, neatly summarized, divided, and legally dissolved by a man in a black robe who had barely looked us in the eye. I looked at David. He was wearing his good gray sweater, the one I had bought him for our anniversary 3 years ago. His hands were shoved into his pockets, and he was rocking slightly on his heels, a nervous habit he'd had since his 20s. He didn't look like an ex-husband. He looked like the man who had held my hair back when I was sick with our first pregnancy, the man who had built the deck on the back of our house, the man who slept next to me every single night. "Sure," I said. My voice sounded thin, carried away by the autumn wind. "Coffee sounds good." We drove to the diner 3 miles from our house. We didn't speak in the car. The radio was playing some low, forgettable morning show, and I watched the familiar neighborhoods roll by through the passenger window. When we got to the diner, we sat in our usual booth near the back. The waitress, a young girl named Chloe, who knew us by sight, dropped off 2 menus and smiled. "The usual for you folks?" she asked. "Yes, please," David said. "Black drip for me, and a drip with 1 sugar for my wife." He didn't catch it. Chloe didn't catch it. But the word hung in the air for me, heavy and sudden, like a dropped plate. Wife. He was so used to saying it. I was so used to hearing it. But it was a lie now. As of 45 minutes ago, I was no longer his wife. I was a single woman, and he was a single man. When the coffee came, we sat in silence for a long time, just watching the steam rise from the thick ceramic mugs. I touched the manila folder sitting on the table between us. It felt radioactive. "It's done," David finally said, keeping his eyes on his cup. "We're safe." I know. And we were. We were completely, legally, mathematically safe. But as I sat there across from the man I loved, looking at the pale ring of skin on his left hand where his wedding band used to sit, I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach that had nothing to do with money. I felt like we had just committed a crime against ourselves. I felt like we had taken something sacred and fed it to a machine. This isn't something you can easily explain to people. If you try to tell your neighbors, your friends, or even your adult children that you divorced your husband of 3 decades just to protect your retirement accounts, they look at you like you've lost your mind. They think it's a joke, or worse, they think it's a cover story for a marriage that was secretly rotting from the inside. They think you just couldn't stand each other anymore and came up with a clever financial excuse to pull the plug. But that wasn't it. I loved David. I still love David. We didn't divorce because our marriage was failing. We divorced because the world around us had changed into something unrecognizable, and the only way to survive it was to change our legal identity. To understand how we ended up in that diner booth, legally severed, but sharing a basket of toast, you have to understand the slow, creeping panic of the last few years. You have to understand what it feels like to be middle class, in your 60s, in the year 2026. David and I did everything we were supposed to do. We played by the rules we were taught in the 1980s. We bought a modest house in a good neighborhood. We worked hard. He as an independent contractor running a small commercial supply business, and I as a high school administrator. We saved. We put money into our 401ks every month, even when things were tight. We paid off our cars. We sent our daughter, Sarah, to a state college and helped her with the tuition so she wouldn't drown in debt. We spent our entire lives building a nest egg, a quiet little fortress that was supposed to protect us when we got old. We had about $1 million in combined retirement accounts, plus the equity in our home. To us, that was a fortune. It was the sum total of early mornings, missed vacations, packed lunches, and 34 years of quiet, steady labor. But over the last few years, the economic ground beneath us started to shift. The volatility was terrifying. Inflation had eaten away at the purchasing power of our savings, but that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the shifting landscape of liability and healthcare. We started seeing it happen to our friends. People our age, people who had been just as careful as we were getting wiped out almost overnight. I remember the exact night the fear really took root in our house. It was a Friday evening, pouring rain outside. We were sitting in the living room, sharing a bottle of cheap wine, when David got off the phone with his friend Mark. Mark and his wife Susan were our age. Mark had run a small landscaping company. One of his employees had made a terrible mistake on a job site, causing massive property damage and a cascading series of injuries. The insurance policies fell short. The lawsuits came down like an avalanche. Because Mark's business was set up as a sole proprietorship years ago, and because of how their joint assets were structured under the new aggressive recovery laws, they didn't just lose the business. They lost their savings. They lost their house. 35 years of work evaporated in 8 months of litigation. David had come back into the living room, his face pale, holding his phone loosely in his hand. He sat down heavily in his armchair and looked at me. "They're moving into an apartment in the city," he had said, his voice barely a whisper. "Susan is going back to work at the grocery store at 64. We didn't sleep that night. We lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain hit the siding. David's business was different, but the risk was the same. He was an independent contractor. He took on commercial liabilities, and the laws in 2026 seemed designed to pierce every corporate veil, to hunt down every last dollar of personal wealth if a claim went sideways. And then there was the other shadow in the room: healthcare. A year before, David had been diagnosed with a progressive, unpredictable autoimmune condition. For now, it was managed. He took a pill every morning and went to work. But we had seen the projections. If it flared up, if he needed the specialized biologic treatments that weren't fully covered, or, God forbid, if he ever needed long-term assisted care, the out-of-pocket costs could run into the tens of thousands a month. I spent weeks researching the new tax codes, the Medicaid look-back periods, the asset recovery laws. The more I read, the more terrified I became. The system was rigged against the careful middle. If you had nothing, the state took care of you. If you had $10 million, you had trusts and offshore shelters and lawyers to hide it. But if you had $1 million and a house, you were a walking target. You were the prime meat. If David's business got sued, or if David's body failed him, the state and the creditors wouldn't just take his half. Because we were married, because our names were joined on the accounts and the deed, they would take it all. They would drain us dry, and I would be left an impoverished widow, sweeping floors somewhere at 70 years old, just to afford heat. Marriage, the very institution that was supposed to bind us together in love and sickness and health, had become our greatest financial liability. Our legal union was a rope tying our ankles together. If one of us went over the cliff, the other was getting dragged down into the abyss. The idea of the divorce started as a dark joke. We were sitting at the kitchen table one Sunday, surrounded by financial statements, tax forms, and medical explanation of benefits letters. We were trying to figure out how to shield the house if David's condition worsened. "You know," David had muttered, rubbing his eyes behind his glasses, "if we weren't married, none of my medical debt could ever touch your retirement. If the business goes under, they couldn't touch the house if it was only in your name." I had laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "What, you want to get a divorce?" He didn't laugh back. He just looked down at the table. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, until the joke evaporated and left something cold and practical in its place. "I'm just saying," he said softly. "It's the only bulletproof way. Legally sever the liability." That was the beginning of the end of our marriage. Not an affair, not a screaming match, not a fading of affection. A quiet, calculated realization over a pile of bills that we could no longer afford to be legally bound to each other. The process of doing it was the most surreal experience of my life. You don't just walk into a courthouse and say, "We're separating our assets, thank you." You have to play the game. You have to hire a lawyer, or in our case, a mediator, to guide you through the dissolution. I remember the day we sat in the mediator's office. It was a sterile room with gray carpets and a large mahogany desk. The mediator, a sharp-featured woman named Eleanor, looked over our intake forms. She looked at our ages, our length of marriage, and our stated reason for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. She looked up at us. We were sitting side by side on a small leather couch. David's knee was resting gently against mine. "You understand," Eleanor said, her tone professional but slightly probing, "that in order to process this, you have to attest under oath that the marriage is irretrievably broken, that there is no hope for reconciliation?" "We understand," David said. His voice was steady. "And you have a settlement agreement drafted. You are transferring your interest in the primary residence entirely to your wife. You are splitting the liquid assets, but you are leaving the bulk of the secure retirement funds in her name while taking the business assets and a smaller portion of the cash." "Yes," David said. Eleanor paused. She tapped her pen against the desk. She had been doing this a long time. She knew what she was looking at. She knew we weren't a warring couple fighting over the silverware. She saw the strategic imbalance of the asset division. She knew exactly what we were doing, building a firewall around me so that his potential future liabilities couldn't touch the core of our life savings. If a creditor or government agency ever looks into this down the line, and they determined this was a sham divorce to hide assets, they will pierce it. It will be considered fraudulent conveyance. She leaned forward. "If you are legally divorced, you must act legally divorced. Your finances must be entirely separate. Your bills must be divided. Your tax filings must be separate. You are terminating a legal entity. The court will not care about your emotional arrangement, but the IRS and the creditors will care very much about your financial reality. Do you understand?" "We understand," I said. But I didn't. Not really. I understood the math. I didn't understand the psychology. The day in court was brief and humiliating. We stood before a judge who looked exhausted. We raised our right hands. We swore to tell the truth. "Is your marriage irretrievably broken?" the judge asked, reading from a screen. David looked straight ahead. "Yes, Your Honor." "And is there any chance of reconciliation through counseling or other means?" "No, Your Honor." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I had to swallow hard to keep from crying. I wasn't crying because I was losing him. I knew he was going to drive me home. I knew he was going to sleep in my house that night. I was crying because I was lying. I was standing in a room dedicated to the law, swearing to God that my life's greatest joy was a broken, dead thing. I was disavowing the man who had been my partner in everything just to protect our bank accounts. When the gavel fell, it sounded like a door slamming shut deep underground. And then we went to the diner. And then we went home. That first evening back in the house was bizarre. Nothing had physically changed. The furniture was the same. The photos of our trips to Maine were still on the wall. The smell of the pot roast I had put in the slow cooker that morning filled the kitchen. But the air felt different. Thinner. We had to start implementing the roommate rules immediately. Eleanor's warning had terrified us. We couldn't leave any loose ends that a forensic accountant could unravel. We sat down after dinner with our laptops. We closed our joint checking account. We opened separate individual accounts at different banks. We transferred the utility bills. The electric and water went into my name. The internet and the streaming services went into his. We drafted a literal lease agreement. Because the house was now entirely in my name, legally shielding it from his business liabilities, David had to become my tenant. We downloaded a standard residential lease template from the internet. We calculated a fair market rent for a room in our area. "Sign here," I said, sliding the printed paper across the kitchen island to him. He took his pen. He hesitated for a second, looking at my signature on the landlord line. Then he signed it. "Rent is due on the 1st of the month," I said, trying to make a joke of it. He didn't smile. "I'll set up an auto transfer." That was the beginning of the double life. We told ourselves that we were outsmarting the system. We told ourselves that this was a masterstroke of defensive financial planning. And on paper, it was brilliant. Within a month, my assets were fully insulated. The house was safe. If David's business collapsed, they could take his company truck and his separate business accounts, but they couldn't touch the roof over our heads. If he ended up in a long-term care facility, Medicare and Medicaid would look at his individual financial profile, which was now legally impoverished enough to qualify for assistance without forcing me to spend down my retirement funds first. We had built the perfect shield, but we didn't realize how heavy a shield is to carry every single day. The friction started in the smallest, most absurd ways. Going to the grocery store, for instance. For 30 years, whoever went to the store just paid for it with the joint card. Now, we had to be meticulous. If I went to the store and bought food for both of us, I had to keep the receipt. We sat down on Sunday nights, and I would highlight the items that were his brand of shaving cream, the specific coffee he liked, his prescription copays, and then he would Venmo me the exact amount. At first, we laughed about it. We felt like college kids splitting a pizza, but after a few months, the laughter stopped. There is something profoundly degrading about sending your husband of 34 years a digital request for $14.12 for toilet paper and milk. It creates a transactional layer over the intimacy. It turns sharing a life into an accounting exercise. Explaining our situation to the outside world became a minefield of awkwardness and minor humiliations. I had to call our auto insurance provider to update our policies. "I need to remove my husband from my policy," I told the agent on the phone. "We're divorced." "I'm so sorry to hear that, ma'am," the young man on the phone said sympathetically. "I can certainly help you with that. What is your new primary address?" "Oh, I'm not moving. Same address." "Okay, and what is your ex-husband's new address so we can forward his separate policy information?" He's at the same address. He still lives here." A long, confused silence on the line. "He still lives at the residence? With you?" "Yes," I said, my face burning with embarrassment. "We are roommates now. We just need separate policies." The agent's tone shifted from sympathetic to deeply suspicious. I could practically hear him clicking boxes on his screen, flagging the account for potential fraud. I spent 20 minutes explaining the logistics, feeling like a criminal trying to justify a lie. This became our reality. To the bank, to the insurance companies, to the IRS, we were strangers who just happened to share a mailing address. We had to file separate tax returns. We couldn't claim any of the married tax benefits. We took a hit on our yearly returns, but we considered it the premium we were paying for the massive asset insurance. But the hardest part wasn't the bureaucracy, it was the social stigma. We didn't tell anyone at first. How could we? But eventually, it became impossible to hide. The breaking point was Thanksgiving, about a year after the divorce was finalized. Our daughter, Sarah, had flown in from Chicago with her husband. We were all sitting in the living room, having drinks before dinner. Sarah is observant, sharp. She works in human resources. She notices details. I handed her a glass of wine, and as I reached out, she caught my hand. "Mom?" she said, frowning. "Why is your wedding ring on your right hand?" I froze. I had moved it to my right hand a few months ago. I hadn't wanted to take it off completely. I loved the ring. David had picked it out himself when he was 25 and broke, but keeping it on my left hand felt like I was tempting fate, leaving a breadcrumb for some imaginary auditor to prove we were faking our separation. David looked up from the fireplace. The room went completely silent. "Did you get it resized?" Sarah asked, looking back and forth between us. And then she looked at David's hand. He wasn't wearing his at all. He kept it in a velvet box in his sock drawer. Sarah's face dropped. "What is going on?" We had to tell her. We sat her down on the sofa, and we explained the whole thing. We explained the liability laws. We explained David's health projections. We explained the spreadsheets, the mediator, the legal firewall. We laid out the sheer, terrifying logic of it all. We expected her to understand. We expected her to say, "Wow, that's incredibly smart. You guys are protecting the family." She didn't. She looked at us like we were aliens. "You got a divorce?" she said, her voice trembling. "You stood in front of a judge and ended your marriage for a tax strategy." "It's not a tax strategy, sweetie," David said gently. "It's survival. If things go wrong, they could take the house. Your mother would be left with nothing." "But it's a lie," Sarah raised her voice. Her husband looked deeply uncomfortable, staring at his shoes. "You're lying to the government. You're lying to your friends. You're lying to yourselves. You're married. You've been married my entire life." "We are still married in our hearts," I said, reaching for her. She pulled away. "That doesn't mean anything, Mom. Marriage is the commitment you make in front of the world. You backed out. You voided the contract because you got scared of a hospital bill. That's so depressing. It's so cheap." Her words hit me like a physical blow. Cheap. That's exactly what it felt like. We had taken the most profound commitment of our lives and reduced it to a risk management calculation. The rest of the holiday was agonizing. Sarah barely spoke to us. When she flew back to Chicago, the house felt emptier than it had ever had. The silence between David and I was no longer a comfortable, companionable silence. It was a strained, heavy thing. The psychological toll of living this double life began to poison the water of our relationship. When you pretend to be roommates for long enough, you start to act like roommates. It happens in microscopic increments. Because we had to keep our finances separate, we stopped making joint decisions about the future. David wanted to buy a new lawnmower. Before, we would have discussed it, checked the budget, and bought it. Now, it was his money. "I think I'm going to buy the riding mower," he announced, not asking, just stating a fact about his independent financial life. I found myself feeling resentful. I was technically his landlord. When the dishwasher broke, he didn't try to fix it like he used to. He looked at me and said, "Your appliance landlord. Want me to call a guy?" He was joking, but the joke had teeth. The boundaries we had drawn on paper were bleeding into our physical space. We still slept in the same bed, but there were nights when he stayed up late watching television in the guest room, and he would just fall asleep in there. Before, I would have woken him up and told him to come to bed. Now I just let him sleep. It felt somehow appropriate. We were divorced, after all. Separate rooms for separate people. We stopped celebrating our anniversary. How do you celebrate the anniversary of a contract you intentionally ripped up? The first year, May 14th, came and went without a word. I spent the whole day hoping he would bring home flowers, hoping he would say, "I don't care what the paper says, you're my wife." He didn't. He came home from work, paid me his half of the internet bill, and watched a baseball game. I cried in the bathroom with the shower running so he wouldn't hear. I didn't realize until much later that he was grieving too. He felt emasculated. He felt like he had become a liability to the woman he loved, so much so that he had to legally exile himself to keep her safe. He told me months later, during a rare moment of vulnerability, that taking his ring off every morning felt like cutting off a finger. But he did it because he thought it was the honorable thing to do. He thought unmarrying me was the ultimate act of providing for me. We were drowning in the absurdity of it. We were protecting our future, but we were destroying our present. We had insulated ourselves from the economic volatility of 2026, but we had exposed ourselves to a profound emotional rot. The true climax of this grand experiment, the moment the concrete reality of what we had done finally smashed through the theoretical logic, happened on a Tuesday night in February. It was 2 a.m. I woke up to a terrible sound. It was a wet, gasping noise coming from David's side of the bed. I turned on the bedside lamp. He was sitting up, clutching his chest, his face pale and glistening with cold sweat. He couldn't speak. He was just shaking his head, his eyes wide with blind panic. His autoimmune condition had triggered a massive inflammatory response, something we had always feared but hadn't seen happen. His heart was under immense stress. I didn't think about bank accounts. I didn't think about liability. I called 911. The ambulance arrived in 6 minutes. The paramedics burst into the room, hooked him up to monitors, and loaded him onto a stretcher. I threw a coat over my pajamas, grabbed my purse, and followed them out into the freezing night. I followed the ambulance in my car, breaking every speed limit, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles ached. I was praying out loud, begging God not to take him, bargaining everything we had. Take the house, take the retirement, just let him breathe, just let him live. When I got to the emergency room, the sliding doors parted and I ran to the triage desk. "David Miller," I gasped to the woman behind the glass. "They just brought him in." The woman looked at her computer screen. She was young, tired, wearing green scrubs. "Yes, they have him in Toronto Bay too. They're stabilizing him." "I need to go back there," I said, moving toward the double doors. "Ma'am?" "Stop," the nurse said sharply. "Only immediate family is allowed back there right now. Are you his wife?" The question hit me like a baseball bat to the ribs. Are you his wife? For 34 years, the answer to that question was the bedrock of my identity. It was my shield. It was my skeleton key to the world. Of course I was his wife. I was the person who knew his medical history, who knew he was allergic to penicillin, who knew that he hated hospitals because his mother died in one. I was his wife, but I wasn't. I stood there under the buzzing fluorescent lights of the ER, my heart pounding in my ears. If I lied and said yes, and they looked at his chart or his intake forms from previous visits, or if they needed me to sign legal medical directives, I would be committing fraud. Worse, I didn't have the legal authority to make decisions for him anymore. We had meant to draft medical power of attorney documents after the divorce, a workaround to give me back the rights I had surrendered, but we had dragged our feet. The paperwork was sitting unsigned in a drawer at home. I choked on the words. I'm his ex-wife, but we live together. I'm his emergency contact. The nurse's expression shifted. The deference and immediate access granted to a spouse vanished. It was replaced with clinical protocol. I understand, she said, her voice flattening. But right now the doctors are working on him. Since you are not legally next of kin, and there is no proxy on file, I cannot let you back there. You'll have to wait in the seating area until the attending physician can come out and give you a courtesy update. A courtesy update? My voice broke. He could be dying. Please take a seat, ma'am. I will let them know you are here. I walked over to the plastic chairs in the waiting room. The room was empty except for a man sleeping in the corner. I sat down, wrapped my coat tightly around myself, and began to shake. It was the coldest, most terrifying hour of my life. I was 20 feet away from the man I loved, and an invisible, impenetrable wall stood between us. A wall built out of the very legal paperwork I had signed to protect us. We had severed our legal union to save our money, but in doing so, we had severed our right to be each other's sanctuary. If David died on that table tonight, I would not be the one holding his hand. The state, the hospital, the doctors, they would make the calls. I was just a roommate, a tenant in common, a woman in the waiting room. I realized then the profound arrogance of our plan. We thought we were smarter than the system. We thought we could hollow out the institution of marriage, scoop out the financial liability, and keep the emotional shell intact. We thought a legal document was just a piece of paper. But it's not just a piece of paper. That contract, that legally binding agreement that you sign in front of the world, is the architecture that holds up your shared reality. It dictates how the world treats you. It commands respect from the outside. When you tear it down, you don't just lose the tax penalties. You lose the walls of your house. You invite the cold wind in. You become vulnerable in ways no spreadsheet can ever calculate. David survived the night. They stabilized his heart, managed the inflammation, and moved him to a cardiac care room by morning. When they finally let me see him, he was hooked up to an IV, looking pale and exhausted. I walked into the room, pulled a chair right up to the bed, and took his hand. I didn't care who saw. I buried my face in his neck and cried until my throat ached. I'm here, he kept whispering, stroking my hair with his free hand. I'm here. It's okay. It's not okay, I sobbed. They wouldn't let me in. They asked if I was your wife, and I had to say no. I had to say no, David. I felt his hand stop moving. The monitor beeped rhythmically in the background. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just stared up at the ceiling tiles, his jaw set, absorbing the reality of what our master plan had actually cost us. I'm sorry, he whispered finally. His voice was cracked, and then, I just wanted to make sure you were safe. I'm not safe if I can't be with you, I said. That was 4 months ago. We are still in the legal gray area. We haven't remarried. The brutal, terrifying logic that drove us to the divorce is still there. The medical bills from that single ER visit and the subsequent hospital stay were astronomical. Because David is now legally a single man with limited assets, the hospital's financial assistance program covered 80% of it. If we had been married, those bills would have been attached to my name, and they would have begun draining the retirement accounts we spent 34 years building. The system worked. The shield held. The money is safe, The house is untouched. But the victory feels like ashes in my mouth. We live in a state of permanent tension now. We went to a lawyer and spent thousands of dollars drawing up ironclad medical proxies, powers of attorney, and living wills, trying to recreate the rights of marriage piece by piece without triggering the financial liabilities. We carry these documents in the glove compartments of our cars. I have a folded copy of his medical proxy in my purse at all times, like a permission slip to love him. But it's exhausting. It is an exhausting way to live the final chapters of your life. We talk sometimes about future-proofing the relationship. We talk about what would happen if the laws change, if they ever pass legislation that protects primary residences or limits spousal liability for medical debt. If they ever fix the system, David says, I'm taking you to the courthouse and marrying you again. I smile when he says it, but I know it's a fantasy. The political climate of 2026 isn't moving toward protecting the middle class. It's moving toward extracting every last dime. The risk will always be there. If I could give advice to couples who are looking at their own spreadsheets, who are reading the same terrifying articles about asset seizure and nursing home costs, and who are contemplating a strategic separation, I would tell them to stop. I would tell them to look at their spouse across the kitchen table and ask themselves what it is they are actually trying to save. Yes, the fear is real. The economic volatility is terrifying. It is deeply unfair that families who have worked hard and played by the rules are forced to choose between financial ruin and their marriage vows. But you have to understand the psychological toll of unmarrying the person you love. It rewires your brain. It forces you to build walls inside your own home. It requires you to lie to your family, to your community, and eventually to yourself. You cannot live a double life for long without splitting down the middle. David and I are still under the same roof. We still make coffee in the morning. We still sit on the back deck and watch the sun go down over the trees. But there is a ghost sitting between us now. It is the ghost of our legal union, the ghost of the identity we abandoned to save our portfolio. Last night, I was organizing a drawer in my bedroom, and I found my wedding ring. I took it out of the small velvet box. The gold was still bright. I slipped it onto my left ring finger. It slid perfectly into the slight indentation that was still there, a phantom groove carved by 34 years of continuous wear. I looked at my hand in the mirror. I looked like a wife. I heard David's heavy footsteps coming down the hall. My heart jumped. Instinctively, reflexively, out of sheer habit trained by months of hiding from imaginary auditors and legal threats, I pulled the ring off my finger. I hid it in my closed fist just as he walked into the room. "Hey," he said, leaning against the doorframe. "I'm gonna run to the hardware store. Do you need anything?" "No," I said, my voice steady, my hand clenched tight behind my back. "I'm good." He nodded, smiled tiredly, and walked away. I stood there in the quiet bedroom, listening to the front door open and close, listening to his truck start in the driveway. I opened my hand and looked at the gold band sitting in my palm. We had saved everything we owned. We had protected the house. We had secured the retirement. We had beaten the system. But as I stood alone in the house that was entirely mine, legally protected and absolutely untouchable, I had never felt so poor in my entire life.